In this video, we're diving headfirst into one of the most unbelievable takedowns in UK organised crime. A story where a millionaire drug importer didn't fall because of a rival, or a police ambush, or a botched run, but because of a box of panadol. Jonathan Cassidy wasn't some street corner dealer. To the underworld, he'd built a reputation as a calm operator, a former builder who somehow ended up moving tons of cocaine through Europe, living between luxury homes, Dubai villas and supercars. People in his circle joked he was the Scouse El Chapo. And for a while, he acted like one. By early 2020, Cassidy and his close-knit crew had become serious players. This wasn't small time. We're talking multi-million-pound shipments, hidden compartments in vehicles, cash moved through coded couriers, and international contacts stretching from Amsterdam to South America. Encrypted phones made him bold. Messages, jokes, business, even family photos bounced around between the crew. To them, this wasn't incriminating evidence. It was just life behind a digital curtain they believed no one could ever lift. And then came the moment that changed everything. A moment so ordinary, it wouldn't even register for most people. Jonathan snapped a picture of a simple packet of painkillers, panadol, and sent it through his encrypted phone. Just another casual message, nothing criminal, nothing bold, nothing dramatic. But hidden in that image was the clue detectives needed. A clue that proved the Scouse El Chapo wasn't some shadowy name on a screen. And the walls were about to close in. This is the story of how one of the Northwest's most organized crime groups built their empire, and how a single photo, a moment of everyday carelessness, became the mistake that brought it all crashing down. By the time most people in the Northwest even knew the name Jonathan Cassidy, the groundwork had already been laid. The route was simple in theory, brutal in execution. Cocaine sourced in South America, shipped into Europe, and funneled through Amsterdam inside modified vehicles. These weren't amateur hideouts. They were engineered compartments, built to vanish under torchlight, designed to beat roadside checks, and loaded with anywhere between 120 and 150 kilos at a time. Once the product hit UK soil, the network spread like veins across a map. Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, Glasgow, even further when the money was right. Jonathan handled the importation, the international calls, the big agreements. His business partner, Nassar Ahmed, moved the cash. Collections capped at £250,000 a run, passed through Bitcoin, unregistered bankers, or trusted couriers who carried sports bags instead of briefcases. Every pound was cycled back into legitimacy, land, properties, even a former cinema. To the outside world, it looked like success. Inside the group, it was simply laundering, fuel to keep the machine running. What made this crew different wasn't violence or threats. It was volume, regular shipments, regular payments, regular growth, no chaos and no noise. To the people involved, it didn't feel like a gang. It felt like an enterprise, smooth, structured, and unstoppable. What they didn't realize was that in this line of work, confidence has a way of souring into complacency. And complacency always leaves a trail. They didn't see themselves as street-level runners anymore. By 2020, this was a hierarchy, structured, disciplined, and humming in the background of the Northwest. And at the top of that structure sat one man with a cartel-sized confidence, Jonathan Cassidy. Inside the group, everyone had a role and everyone had a name, not the ones on their passports, but the ones stitched into their encrypted devices. Jonathan was Whiskey Wasp. His brother Jamie, the former football prodigy whose name once echoed around youth pitches, was known as Nuclear Dog. Their partner, the financial architect Nassar Ahmed, operated as Dotted Jaw, And then there was Joshua Avis, the younger link in the chain, using the handle OctoJungle. On the encrypted phones, they lived two lives at once. One was business, kilos, cash, logistics, routes. The other was casual, even domestic. Photos of homes, family moments, everyday snapshots. They trusted those devices far beyond their design. It wasn't just coordination, it was conversation, boasting, banter. Lines blurred. Jonathan, especially, leaned into the myth. One night, watching Narcos, he joked that he shared a birthday with El Chapo and sent a screenshot to prove it. His friend fired back instantly. Coincidence? I think effing not. To them, it was swagger. To detectives later, it was a breadcrumb. Ahmed and Jonathan even shared messages from football trips, swapping photos from matches at Anfield. A reminder that for all the scale of their operation, they still carried themselves like local lads who'd simply found a bigger game to play. But behind the nicknames and the banter, the confidence was starting to drift into something else. Comfort. And comfort is the one thing an organized crime group should never have. The clock was already ticking, but in April 2020, it started to sprint. For detectives, the timeline would later read like a pressure gauge. 6 weeks where everything in Jonathan Cassidy's operation moved faster, louder, and riskier than ever before. Deals weren't just being arranged, they were being stacked. Multi-million-pound loads, one after another, moving across motorways and borders like a conveyor belt of pure profit. Behind the scenes, messages showed a man who thought the world couldn't touch him. Jonathan was sharper, bolder, and far more careless than he'd ever been before. The bigger the money got, the more unstoppable he seemed to feel. And then came the moment that summed it all up. A simple line sent mid-conversation. Scruffy mugs with rucksacks. It sounded like a joke, a throwaway dig at plain-clothed police. But the timestamp told a different story. Because at that exact same moment, in the real world, one of his associates was being grabbed by plain-clothed officers carrying rucksacks. Text and reality perfectly aligned. For investigators, that wasn't just a clue. It was a confirmation, a bridge between the hidden world of encrypted messages and the physical world unfolding on the streets. Around April time, the pace climbed. Huge money was moved, close to £10 million over 3 months. Orders were placed, routes were adjusted, and Jonathan's confidence swelled. But threading through the middle of it all was one tiny detail. One photo, one object that meant nothing at the time. A casual box of panadol. A detail so small that none of them realized it yet. But it was about to detonate everything. For months, detectives had been piecing together fragments, shipment routes, burner devices, cash runs, coded handles. None of it was quite enough. Everything pointed towards Jonathan Cassidy, but nothing nailed him to the wall. And then came the moment no one in his organization saw coming. The moment a multi-million-pound empire started to crumble because of something you'd find in any corner shop. A simple packet of panadol. It dropped into the encrypted chat like it was nothing. No guns, no route, and no cash. Just a photo, crisp, well lit, held casually in someone's hand. The kind of picture people send when they're chatting without thinking. For detectives watching, it was background noise, until one analyst zoomed in. On the glossy plastic, just where the light flared off the wrapper, there it was. A ridge, a whirl, a perfect fingerprint pressed into the packaging, clear enough to lift, clear enough to run, and it matched. The print belonged to Jonathan Cassidy, the man behind Whiskey Wasp, the man steering shipments worth more than most people will see in a lifetime. One photo, sent without caution, had just confirmed identity, device ownership, and physical possession, all in a single shot. And it didn't stop there. More images began to slot into place, pictures of his house on the Wirral, interiors sent to associates, glimpses of family gatherings, even the home of Nassar Ahmed. Photos that were never meant to be evidence suddenly became a map, connecting people, locations, and timelines with a level of precision the investigators hadn't dared hope for. The first domino had fallen, not from a raid, not from an informant, not from a surveillance van parked in the dark. From a packet of panadol, a throwaway moment that blew open one of the biggest drug conspiracies in the Northwest. And Cassidy would never recover from it. When word spread that investigators were making arrests linked to intercepted encrypted devices, the mood inside Jonathan Cassidy's world changed overnight. The confidence that had carried him through years of high-level dealing suddenly had a crack running through it. And he didn't wait around to see how wide it would get. On the 8th of July 2020, he made his move. One flight, one bag, one destination, Dubai. For years, the group had operated behind layers of secrecy, code names, tight circles, trusted couriers. But now, with associates being stopped by plain-clothed officers and messages aligning a little too neatly with police timings, Jonathan decided distance was the safest option. Dubai offered exactly what he wanted: space, sun, and a place where money talked louder than suspicion. Footage later recovered showed him leaning into that lifestyle: designer watches, high-end clothing, the kind of spending that turned heads. He drove a Lamborghini through the streets as casually as someone taking a corner shop run. And while he was thousands of miles from home, his browsing history told the rest of the story. Scrolling through luxury interiors, eyeing villas worth £2.5 million, trying to perfect the life he imagined staying in. And then there was the bed, a £22,000 showpiece he'd been in the process of buying, the kind of item that symbolized the empire he believed he'd built. One officer later joked, "He'll never sleep in it." And they weren't wrong, because while Jonathan was enjoying the heat, the temperature back home was rising too. Detectives weren't scrambling. They weren't chasing shadows. They were watching, and waiting for the moment he'd step back onto UK soil. By autumn 2020, the shine had worn off the empire. The money was still flowing. The contacts were still answering. But behind the scenes, detectives were lining everything up. Phone data, routes, couriers, cash drops, all pointing in one direction. And then Jonathan Cassidy made the one move nobody expected. He came home. On the 17th of October 2020, after months in Dubai, he stepped off a flight into Manchester Airport. No disguises, no last-minute diversions, just a quiet walk through arrivals, right into the arms of waiting officers. A man who once ran a multi-million-pound import line now caught in seconds, not by a raid, but by a return ticket. A month later, his brother Jamie was taken at home. Police found a machete, an encrypted phone, and paperwork from the same investigation that would now shape his future. A career that once showed promise on the pitch ended with evidence boxes on a kitchen table. Across Greater Manchester and Merseyside, the net pulled tight. Couriers were intercepted. 2 separate car stops in a single surveillance day pulled in £250,000 each, stacked in bags and hidden under seats. Another £500,000 followed soon after, all tied back to the same network, the same hierarchy, the same decisions. Ahmed's financial web collapsed next. Transfers, Bitcoin movements, unregistered banking links. Every pattern the detectives had been tracking for months suddenly clicked into place. And with the phones attributed, movements mapped, and cash recovered, the structure that once moved tons of cocaine across Britain was gone. What had taken years to build fell apart in weeks. And for the first time, the Scouse El Chapo story didn't look like a legend anymore. By the time the case reached Manchester Crown Court, the swagger was gone. The empire that once moved tons of cocaine across the country had been stripped right back, reduced to screenshots, cell site maps, and a forensic team holding up a blown-up photograph of a box of panadol. For years, the group had worked in shadows. Now everything was on display, in the courtroom. The legal battle didn't start with the charges, it started with the data. Defense teams pushed hard, challenging how the material had been collected, whether it could be used, whether it was transmission or storage, or something in between. It became more than a drugs case. It became a national test of what encrypted evidence really meant. High Court, Court of Appeal, months of back and forth. But piece by piece, the prosecution held the line. Jonathan Cassidy, Nasser Ahmed, and Jamie Cassidy. Their roles were laid out like a blueprint: importation at the top, finances rooted underneath, distribution at the edges, surveillance footage, banking trails, seized cash. The timeline formed itself. The evidence was too detailed, too consistent. The fingerprints, the timestamps, the messages that had aligned perfectly with real-world arrests. The pressure built until the only move left was acceptance. A trial was set for February, but the defendants pleaded guilty prior to the start. Each were sentenced according to their roles. Jonathan Cassidy, 21 years and 9 months for conspiracy to import cocaine, conspiracy to supply cocaine, conspiracy to conceal, transfer and disguise criminal proceeds. Nasser Ahmed, 21 years, 9 months for the same offences. And Jamie Cassidy, who without the importation charge got 13 years and 3 months for conspiracy to supply cocaine. Conspiracy to conceal, transfer and disguise criminal proceeds. One of the men, Joshua Avis, vanished while on bail. The rest were taken down to the cells as the courtroom settled back into silence. And just like that, a multi-million-pound enterprise ended the way most of them do. Not with gunfire or chases, but with paperwork, procedures, and a judge reading out the years. For years, the operation ran in the shadows, money counted in sports bags, cocaine measured in blocks, and confidence built on the belief that nothing could touch them. But in the end, none of the scale mattered. Not the modified lorries, the international contacts, or the millions moved quietly through back channels. What brought the whole thing crashing down wasn't a dramatic raid or a rival crew. It was a moment so small it barely registered at the time. A photo of a simple packet of panadol. A fingerprint caught in the reflection. A piece of evidence hiding in plain sight. From there, the myth unraveled. Identities confirmed. Timelines built. An empire mapped out through messages they thought would disappear. And that's the irony. You can move tons of product, run a network that spans continents, and convince yourself you're untouchable. But the game never ends with the big moments. It ends with the tiny ones, the slips, the arrogance, the things you don't think twice about. Criminal empires rarely fall with a bang. Most fall with a whisper, and a photograph that should never have been sent. For more raw and real crime stories, hit the like button and subscribe. Until the next episode, stay alert and stay safe.